If your sausage doesn't smack you in the face with smoke, garlic or paprika, it's a lie. One carb is never enough, and you simply can't have too much cabbage. After nearly 30 years in Slovakia, I've finally figured out some of the unwritten rules of Slovak food. When I made my last video about Slovak food, I wasn't expecting to discover a whole rulebook. But after reading hundreds of comments, I realised that's exactly what I'd stumbled across. Slovak food has its own unwritten rules, and they're quite different from the British ones. So today, I'll start with a quick recap of the ones we've already met, give you the results of the pastry-and-meat challenge, and then share 6 more food rules I've picked up after nearly 3 decades in Slovakia. Along the way, I'd also like to put in a good word for a few British foods that deserve a better reputation. In Slovakia, a meal without soup is like a day without sunshine, and that soup is often, but not always, a fairly thin broth or vivar with noodles and vegetables. In Britain, soup often is the meal, thick, hearty, eaten with bread, butter, or even a sandwich. On Fridays in Slovakia, dessert might be the main course, the sladký obed or sweet lunch. Pancakes with jam or buchty na pare, sweet steamed buns filled with plum preserve and topped with butter and cocoa. Apparently, the solution to the crushing disappointment of a sweet main course is to have a more substantial soup beforehand. I've also mentioned before that the main meal in Slovakia tends to be lunch, whereas in Britain the warm meal more often arrives in the evening, with lunch little more than sandwiches and a bag of crisps. Slovak meals stack carbs like they're going out of fashion. And I love it. Granadierski pochod, chernohorski rezeň with roast potatoes, chips and rice pol na pol. You know what I'm talking about. And finally, I challenge Slovaks to name a traditional pastry filled with meat, like the British pasty. Hundreds of comments later, and it was clear that there are meat-filled dumplings, gemerské guličky, zemiaková buchta s udeným mesom, and in some areas meat-filled pierogi. There are also various combinations of meat and bread or flatbread, stuffed langosh or stuffed potato pancake, a speciality from Prievidza apparently, hot dogs, even kapusniki, buns filled primarily with cabbage but possibly also smoked meat. But what there seems to be a genuine lack of is actual pastry with meat filling. To be clear, by pastry I mean either puff pastry, listkové testo, or short crust pastry, which I'm not even sure how to translate. Křehké testo, maybe? It's made in the same way as křehké testo, by rubbing butter or lard into flour. But in Slovakia the recipe almost always calls for icing sugar, and the filling is invariably sweet. In Britain this is not the case. Sugar need not be involved even for sweet pies, like apple or cherry, or lemon meringue. And it certainly isn't in the recipe for pork pies, steak and ale pies, Cornish pasties, sausage rolls. Meat in pastry has long been a portable snack in the UK, but in Slovakia? Sure, there are some sad parky v cestičku in Lidl, and one commenter mentioned a shop called Anielské koláče in Žilina, which sounds lovely. Another recommended a chain of shops whose nearest branch is unfortunately 300 kilometres away. On the whole, though, I think this commenter summed it up best. In Slovakia, pastries are basically supposed to be sweet. Several commenters suggested that this was because of Slovakia's history, in which meat was scarce. Another mentioned that traditional meat preservation methods often involve smoking, and that this perhaps does not lend itself to pie making. Personally, I think that the portable carb plus meat snack niche was filled by the good old schnitzel sandwich, which subsequently proved impossible to dislodge. Back when I used to travel by train more, I used to look forward to the moment when my fellow travellers would, almost as one, reach into their bags and then unwrap their silver foil-wrapped rezniev chlebe. Pastry is not the only thing which generally stays sweet in Slovakia. Palacinki, crepe-style pancakes, are very popular, but are almost always served with jam, Nutella, or sweetened curd cheese, tvaroh. If I mention to my students that I like to have my pancakes with cheese and ham sometimes, they look at me like I'm some kind of pervert. And God forbid that I try to explain Yorkshire puddings. Despite the name, these are a savoury accompaniment to roast meat, especially roast beef. The recipe is exactly as for my pancakes, but with a bit more egg. They're typically cooked in a muffin tin in a very hot oven, so you end up with three-dimensional hollow balls of savoury pancake. I mentioned parki, or frankfurters, with bread and mustard in the last video. Many thanks for the tips, by the way. I'm currently exploring brands, types and cooking methods and will report back in due course. Slovak breakfasts, as far as I've experienced and understood from my students, are generally a savoury affair. Slices of bread or rožky with parki, ham, salami or eggs in one form or another, possibly raw peppers or other vegetables. Traditionally, the sweetest it gets would be bread and homemade jam or maybe honey. What very seldom gets mentioned is cereal. I get the impression it's viewed here as more of something that children eat. But in the UK, cereal is the #1 breakfast choice, even amongst adults. I personally like Weetabix, which at least has some fibre to go with the sugar. Toast comes in second, often with jam, marmalade or delicious lemon curd. The classic English breakfast, or Scottish, Irish or Welsh breakfast, is a thing of beauty, but in reality it's more of an occasional treat. I have it maybe a couple of times a year, and usually for lunch, not breakfast. While we're on the subject, there are a few things worth noting here. These are baked beans in tomato sauce, very popular in the UK, but not so much in Slovakia. They can be a whole meal when served with toast, or better still, cheese on toast, another thing which doesn't seem particularly popular in Slovakia. This is black pudding, or blood sausage, the UK version of jaternica, also called hurka or jelito. And this is back bacon, my favourite kind of bacon, and quite different from Slovak Adidas slanina, and also from streaky bacon, which is the one known in Slovakia as anglická slanina. I'm no butcher, but I think this part of the pig in Slovakia is invariably turned into pork chops, or schnitzel. And these are our sausages, which brings me to my next rule. I must confess I'm no expert on Slovak klobasy, or sausages, but as far as I understand, if your sausage doesn't smack you in the face with smoke, garlic or paprika, it's a lie. Slovak sausages have a much stronger flavour and coarser texture than their British cousins, which Slovaks might reasonably describe as klobasy light. After a few years in Slovakia, I missed British sausages so much that I determined to make my own. I bought a grinder, some nice pork, and about 5 metres of salted pig's intestines, which I duly soaked in water. I procured some sage, mace and nutmeg, salvia, muszkatowy kwiat and muszkatowy orech. I ground the meat, caramelised the onions, and even made my own breadcrumbs, struhanki. I mixed it all together with salt and pepper and then fed it back through the grinder, this time attaching the sausage tube with the pig's guts carefully rolled over it like an obscene prophylactic. And I successfully made some delicious sausages, and then never made them again. The whole process was so involved and frankly smelly that I never did it a second time. But whenever I'm in the UK, I go sausage crazy. Okay, let's do a couple of quickies before we get to the last one. My favourite flavour of ice cream is mint choc chip, which is always green, the traditional colour for mint in the UK. But I have lost track of the number of times that I've thought I've found mint choc chip ice cream in Slovakia, only to discover that it's bloody pistachio, or apple. This almost goes without saying, but I am never not shocked by just how popular cabbage is in Slovakia. Segedinsky goulash, koložvárska kapusta, holubki, kapusniki, kapusnica, strapačky s kapustou, kapustové flia. I have never found Slovak meat dishes to be lacking moisture. They often come with a nice jus, výpek or šťava, or a lovely sauce, or perhaps a ton of unctuous red cabbage. Failing that, there's always tatarska and ketchup. Perhaps this is why Slovak cuisine has never found a need for gravy, a meaty sauce made by thickening the výpek with flour and adding wine, stock or water from the boiling vegetables, or possibly by adding boiling water to bestow gravy granules. This thick, usually brown liquid is served in a specially shaped jug called a gravy boat and poured liberally over dishes consisting of roast meat and vegetables, such as the classic Christmas dinner, or my favourite, roast beef and Yorkshire puddings. It unites, warms and lubricates the disparate elements of the dish in the most marvellous way. And it also makes sense of Yorkshire puddings as gravy containment vessels. The sweet equivalent of gravy is custard. This is a vanilla sauce made with egg yolks, sugar and milk, usually served warm, though also delicious cold as the middle layer in a trifle. Like gravy, custard is a kind of universal lubricant for all manner of desserts. Apple crumble, sticky toffee pudding, spotted dick. And when I was in primary school, it was served in a jug so that each child could pour it over their afters. And, like gravy, it's largely absent from Slovak cuisine. It's kind of like vanilkový pudding or the vanilla layer in kremesh, though I suspect those are often overly set with gelatin for my tastes. The only time I've had something like hot custard in Slovakia is the thinner sauce on dukatové bukty. But perhaps I'm missing something here. I am sure you will let me know in the comments. So, there you go, my not entirely serious list of Slovak food rules. Can you think of any more? Did I make any mistakes? Just before you head to the comments section, I have one final gift for you. Slovakia is a country that adores potatoes, a country that is practically built on potatoes, a people who have potatoes in their DNA. And yet, there is one form of potato that is almost absent from the country's cuisine. Rather than the star billing it clearly deserves, it's relegated to a very occasional cameo as a side dish. In Britain, it's a hugely popular street food, a staple of school and university lunches, and a cheap and easy dinner. Behold, the baked potato. Slovakia, where are your baked potatoes? I'm telling you, this is a goldmine of a business idea. Street food is super popular these days, well, at least in Kosice. Potatoes are basically your national vegetable. Or is it cabbage? Get a food truck with a massive oven and a bunch of big spuds. Get a selection of toppings. In Britain, it would be butter, baked beans and cheese, or chili con carne, or tuna and sweet corn. But in Slovakia, it could be sour cream, cheese and bacon, or segadin, or treska. Serve it all in an environmentally friendly cardboard tray with a wooden fork. Come on! Winter is coming. Think of the Christmas markets. It's a winner. I'm telling you. I'm James Blore, and this has been the Blorecast. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.